Today we're going to be restoring the chrome on this Triumph TR4 rear bumper. As you can see, it's in a bit of a state. There's some rust here. The existing plating is peeling off as well. But we think that this looks like it's a good solid bumper, so hopefully it'll be a straightforward re-chrome. Let's crack on with it.
It's quite heavily corroded. You can see that. In fact, you can actually hear it. The first job is to book it in. We list all the parts out individually like this. Then the next thing to do is to photograph the items. This gets printed out and then that travels around the workshop with the paperwork. The first thing that we've got to do is remove all the old plating and the rust and get it back to bare metal so that we can do some polishing. We're going to wire it up onto copper wires so that we can pass an electric current through it, but we're going to do it the opposite way so that the plating is actually plated off instead of on. Here it's going into the tank where we remove the plating. This is mainly made up of sulfuric acid with another few bits in it. After it's been in there for a while, we can take it out. And what's happening here is we're putting it in hydrochloric acid. That's to remove the rust. It's the same acid that's in your stomach, but a bit stronger. Once the rust is removed, we can give this a good swill off, and then it will be ready to go into the polishing shop. If you enjoy our videos, please like and subscribe to our channel, as it really helps our videos get noticed. Now we're in the polishing shop. This bumper is actually rougher than it looks. We've cleaned up an area here so you can see how the corrosion has bitten into it. Another thing we've discovered is there's an old repair. It looks like somebody cut through it with a grinder and then brazed it up again. Time to get the gloves on. We're starting off with a 60 grit belt because this bumper's so rough. We need to get all of those corrosion marks out on this first operation. This is what we call cutting out. As you see, you can't remove marks without making a few sparks. Those sparks always look great, so here's a bit of slow-mo action so you can see what they look like. In order to remove all these marks and to not put ripples in the bumper, you've got to do long strokes that overlap. And you have to keep going over it evenly until all the marks out. You can't concentrate in one area or else you'll put ripples in the bumper. There's a bit of grease going on there. What that does is it controls the cut and slows it down. You have to be more careful around edges. Here we're going to speed it up for you. You have to keep changing the belts to get to progressively finer ones. Now we're getting on to the last operation. This is about a 600 belt. And there it is, it's ready for copper plating. If it wasn't for that repair, we would have been able to polish it up so it didn't require copper plating. That's what that repair looks like now. This is the bumper's first visit to the plating shop. It's going to be in here later for nickel and chrome, but what we're going to do here is wire it up so that it's ready to take the copper plating. The copper plating is to help hide marks. If you think of it doing the same job in plating that a high build primer does in paint, it's about right. Here we are going into a soapy cleaner. Time to get the gloves on. And this must be given a good scrub on the front and the back to make sure that there's no grease, dirt, polishing compounds or anything like that left on it. Even though it's nice and clean, it's not clean enough. We're going to put it through an electric cleaner. There's the power going on, and this removes any oxides that have formed on the surface since it was polished. If we don't remove them, the plating won't stick properly. So we go through a rinse system to rinse that soap off. We're going through progressively cleaner water. Before we go into the main acid-based copper to put a high build coating on, we have to go into the cyanide copper first. That's because you can't put acid copper directly onto steel. After it's been in the cyanide copper for a few minutes, there'll be enough of a coating to protect the steel from the acid copper, which it just needs when it starts plating. As soon as it starts plating, everything's fine. Here we are coming out of the cyanide solution. Back through the same rinse system as before. swill tank is getting cleaner. And there we go, into the acid copper. Time to set the power. And that's going to cook away there for a couple of hours or so until it's ready to come out. Now it's finished, it's just a case of a quick swill to get rid of the copper solution and hang it up for the water to dry off. Now we're back in the polishing shop and we're going to go over this copper and polish it up so that it's good enough to accept a high quality nickel and chrome finish. First of all, we're going to methodically go over all the surface with a fine belt. This is probably about a 600. Using grease again to moderate the cut. Got to be careful around all the corners and edges and ends and all that area. We don't want to polish through this because if we do, you'll see it in the finished article. Now we're on to a brush. This is so that we can quickly remove those marks that we've just put in with the belt. Now remember, all of this coppering and copper mopping has been necessary because it got an existing repair that we wouldn't have been able to hide without putting a copper layer on. The problem with a braze repair is that when you do this final polishing, it actually scoops a bit more of the brass out than the steel because it's softer, and it leaves you with a perfect ring showing exactly where the repairs are. By using the copper, it's a bit like putting a high build primer on. We can now work the copper and get rid of the marks. Notice that when he's polishing with this tool, he's putting the workpiece against his body and using body weight and not arm strength. That's because he's actually putting quite a lot of pressure on there. Now we're on to the final polishing operation, which is colouring up. Now to do this, we're going to be using a large mop which is called an airflow. These cut quicker, but they're strictly for professional use because they're a little bit snatchy. The polishing compound is put on little and often. You can see the shine really building on this bumper now. And there it is, finished, ready for plating. Last time in the plating shop now. Being wired up on copper wires again. Into the hot soak cleaner, and it's time to give it a good scrub again as we did before, front and back, to make sure it's right. Into the electric cleaner again, and there are the oxides fizzing off of it. Now we're going to go through the counterflow rinse system exactly the same as we did before. So from the dirty tank into the progressively cleaner tanks. And now it's straight into the nickel solution. Now it's this nickel layer that's going to give all the weather protection and the good looks. So time to set the power and leave it cooking away there for a good hour or so to get a nice deposit. You can see there that it's already looking finished. We need to swill this nickel solution off, and then it will be ready for the chrome. This is the final plating tank, the chrome tank. Now it's a very thin layer that's put on, not normally any thicker than 200 thousandths of an inch, so this will be in this tank for about 3 to 5 minutes. The purpose of the chrome layer, other than changing the colour, is it's actually there to stop the nickel layer from tarnishing. Here the chromic acid's being neutralised. Then it's ready for a swirl in clean water. The plating's finished. so we're just going to let the water dry off. Every item that's finished has to be wiped down and inspected so that we can make sure that it's absolutely spot on. Here we're just using some polish and a cloth to remove the watermarks so that we can see that there's no defects. So here's the finished article. That was where that repair was, now invisible. And here's a reminder of what it looked like to begin with. If you enjoy our videos, please like and subscribe to our channel, as it really helps our videos get noticed.